Okay.
and set up the Facebook stream.
Okay.
And then do you want to start with a quick hello for me, or do you want to just start with Julia?
Yeah. I want to talk to you
Okay.
about what this youth reader schedule
Okay.
is about.
Sounds good.
And then kind of a grounding in that.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to
Oops, I don't want
who's
that.
our first author?
That would be, yes, that would be Julia.
Julia.
Okay. Hang on just a second. It wants me to. Here's what I want. I want to share on my page.
What's Julia's last name?
Lion,
What's
L-Y-O-N.
Julia's last name?
Lion, L-Y-O-N.
I'm sure that like is going to trip me up.
You know, people,
But it's okay.
people will understand. Okay.
No, it's like when you say something here,
Yeah,
and then about 2 seconds later,
you
you
hear
say it again.
right? Okay.
You're repeating yourself.
I'm gonna try not to. All right. I'm gonna just start letting people come in as they wish, and yeah, we're live.
Hey,
Good morning, everybody.
We're live and living in color.
Right from the wash pad in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. For those of you who are in various places, I'm going to say something on the up front. We have a very interesting lag. I don't know if you guys can hear it.
Interesting lag. I don't know if you guys can hear it. I can.
So I'm hearing myself say
So
something.
I'm hearing myself say something and then repeat it about 2 seconds later. So if you hear me repeating, can you hear me? Does it sound like I'm repeating myself? Like an echo or anything? Do you hear me say the same thing twice?
Yeah.
Oh, because it's being
Okay.
picked up through my microphone.
Oh. Okay. Well, let's see. I'm not sure how we're going to do that.
Hang on, if I.
Now, can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me? And
Can you hear me?
can you hear Jennifer?
A little bit. So,
Yeah, I think you're picking me up from that.
We are challenged. This mic on, but
It's going to double up, and then if I'm hearing 2 things, that's one thing. But if they're hearing 2 things, ooh, I can get dicey. We heard it twice, but then we didn't hear it at all. Let's see. Yeah, this is a new technological challenge that I'll have to be thinking about for the future. But since it's 10:32, I'm going to try to get started. We'll just struggle with the technicalities and hope
that the quality of the program
will help you to excuse the technical difficulties. It's unlikely, but well, we're going to try for it anyway. So it's now time for brainstorming the human connection. And we have a very special program today because we're with midgets. There are all kinds of them, every place, little munchkins, and they're here because we have a special program for them, a young readers program. And the young readers program, I think, is a very special one because we really can use young people to get involved in reading and start to appreciate reading, and not just reading for reading's sake, but to get something out of it. And maybe in the beginning, it's just learning the technical stuff and learning to appreciate that information can be found in books. And it's an important thing to reiterate. There's a whole other discussion that could be had about the availability of some books in devices versus books that are in print. And that's a whole discussion that would be useful for us to have sometime on our brainstorming session, because there's some really important things and differences that people should know. But that said, it's useful that young people start to become comfortable with books, and also looking and appreciating and feeling like books have something to offer them. And if that's one of your early childhood experiences, it's much more likely that as you grow older, you will have some attachment, not just to the paper, but to the information and the things that you can learn, and the things, the feelings and the places where the books can take you that maybe physically you can't go, at least at the moment. And in some places, it's just not possible for humans to go there, but you can share that space with another human who has imagined that space and created that mental space for you. And we're going to be talking to some of those people who are doing that a little later. But right now, I'd like to start with Jennifer, who is the director of this whole book festival. In case you didn't know, this is the weekend for the book festival. And if you're any place near Brookings or can get there by flying, or probably there's not very many boats that go there, but any other kind of way that you can get there, you might want to head out right now, because it'll start tomorrow in Brookings. But today we're going to be talking about what the book festival has for young people, particularly the really young people. So welcome, Jennifer. Can you tell me, or tell all of us, what is let's say the basis for having, or the reasoning, or the feeling, what to include a special section for children in the book festival?
Well, and I'm going to say one quick thing. It might help with the lag if you mute while I'm talking, and I was muting while you talked. And I'm going to talk very briefly because I want to get a couple of authors on who have to go on to programs. But the South Dakota Festival of Books has always had young readers, authors. We've had children's authors and illustrators. We've had young adult authors and illustrators. But in 2014, we wanted to step up that programming a little bit to connect with schools more. And part of our goal is just to increase the excitement level for reading and writing. That led to our adoption of the Young Readers One Book program, where we give books away to students throughout South Dakota. And we do that at 3rd grade because that's kind of a crucial time where we often say they're done learning to read and they're starting to read to learn. But it's also a time when they're sort of getting aware of whether reading is cool or not. And we would like to keep reading cool if we possibly can. So we kind of added a preview day to the festival. When we're out in Deadwood, we do this in Rapid City. When we're in Brookings, we do it here in Sioux Falls at the Washington Pavilion, and we invite school groups and families to come and listen to usually about 10 different children's authors and illustrators. And we've just got our first round of programs started here at the Washington Pavilion at 10 o'clock with groups around, and we will have our next one at 11. And so we'll have these authors wandering in and out in between.
Well, good. I see we have a few.
I should turn this on. That'll work. I see we have a few authors who are kind of standing by, and maybe we can like wrangle one of them into
the speaker seat here.
Yes, I'm going to have Helen Frost sit down here just for 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Lawrence will do the question. Yeah.
Hello, Helen.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Good.
Good.
Well,
I'm hoping we won't get too much echo,
because it's kind of hard to turn off and turn on.
Yeah,
That's going
I
to be a little
understand.
tricky. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your background. What kind of children's books do you read? I mean, do you write?
Yeah, I both read and write. So I have 2 different kind of categories, I guess you'd say. I write novels in verse or poems. So maybe I think I have 11 of those. And I write picture books, which are mostly these days, especially collaborations with a photographer about nature. So he takes these really beautiful pictures of little small things in your backyard. And then I write usually one poem or sometimes a series of poems to go with those photographs. So we work together in a collaboration. The novels are, take a lot longer to write, and I really love doing both of those things. So I really write for all ages.
So are the novels for children?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
but they're for
And-
older children. The picture books typically are like preschool, kindergarten, first grade, kids just learning to read, although adults always enjoy them too. And then the novels are more for like 2nd through 12th grade. I have some for young adults and some for middle grade and some for early readers.
Now you have a large span of
young people.
Right.
Can you tell us something about how you think about constructing a book for really young readers with the pictures and everything? And then older books, both the subjects and the way that you present the material.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, because I work with poetry, I think the books for the picture books tend to be, not all of them, but most of them are in rhyming, metrical, a poem that is, if you listen to it, you can tell immediately that it's a poem. The books for older children, some of them are more free verse and others are very carefully constructed formal structures, like sonnets or sestinas, or that's kind of, I think that's sort of what I'm known for, is working with formal poetry, partly just to introduce kids to the idea that there are lots of ways that you can use language, and that I love doing that myself. I love the learning about the power and flexibility of language. So
What kind of subjects do you approach for those different age groups and why those subjects?
yeah,
Why?
picture books, as I said, are mostly about the natural world. It's just something I've always loved ever since I was a child in Brookings. That's where I grew up. And the novels, some of them are contemporary and just, thinking about a situation that young people might face, or that, I remember facing myself sometimes. And then some of them are historical. So I'll get interested in something in history and develop a story around that. And each of those two, I think of them as two really different ways of writing. The historical ones kind of have a built-in, almost a plot structure, because you know what happened in history and your characters are responding to that. And the contemporary ones, you really have to, I feel like I have to do a lot more structuring of the story and exploring it and so forth.
What kind of experience do you hope that your young readers will have as a result of reading?
Will have.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I hear from readers when they, I think one of my favorite letters was, "I've almost finished reading your book and I hope you're writing a sequel." That feeling of just getting caught up in the story, loving the characters, wanting to know what happens next and that sort of thing. Beyond that, of course, I have, like if they're especially the historical ones, I do want them to come to understand history in with more depth, I guess I would say, just by entering into it through the eyes of characters who may have lived at that time.
Well, we have a couple of authors
Yeah,
that are standing by.
yeah,
So I want to get to them because I know you have to go to a presentation
thank you.
and then they do too.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I hope we'll have a chance
Yeah,
to.
it's so
bring you
nice
back.
meeting you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. I hope we can
I
bring
hope
you
we
back.
can bring
and
you
we
back
can
and we
discussion.
That would be great.
Even if
continue
you're
this
in
discussion.
some weird place like
Even if you're in
Indiana.
some weird place like.
Well, you're a
Indiana.
wonderful interviewer. I appreciate it. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth.
Who's our next victim?
Oh.
Next, I am bringing in Julia Lyon, who is the author of our selection to represent South Dakota at the National Book Festival, A Dinosaur Named Ruth. So I will have her.
Oh, what kind of, go ahead, have a seat. what time schedule is she on?
She's got an 11 o'clock as well.
Oh. We have to get this pony on the merry-go-round. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Good morning.
Can you tell us something? If she looks like she's looking off to the side.
I know, I'm gonna look up, look forward, I'm looking forward.
That's right.
I'm following directions.
She's right next to me. Let's talk a little bit about who is and where are you from?
And where are you
Well,
from?
Lawrence, I am originally from the Washington DC area, but I now live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am a mom of 3, but I also was a longtime newspaper journalist, and I have transitioned to becoming a children's book author, which is a career that I love and I'm really excited to pursue in the future.
Tell us about the books that you write. Who are they for?
That's a great question. My new book is called A Dinosaur Named Ruth. It is a nonfiction story, a true story for kids, I would say between about kindergarten and 4th grade, even preschoolers up to 4th grade. We all love dinosaurs, right? And it's for kids who want to get inspired. I noticed as a parent that whenever I was reading books to kids, particularly my oldest would say, is this a true story? And when it was a true story, he would be extra excited. And so that made me want to pursue the idea of writing nonfiction books, which is what I'm working on, as well as some fiction picture books today as well.
So when you're writing books for children, what do you hope to accomplish when they're reading your books? What do you want to change in their lives or bring to them? What's the effect?
I hope I'm writing a story that matters. And by that, I mean, it could be a story that no one's ever told before, and that I feel is a story that's missing from our, history in this country. And that is an example with my dinosaur story. It was a woman who found these bones, found these fossils, didn't know what they were, was ignored for decades, and finally was able to find out that there was a massive dinosaur quarry literally in her backyard on her family's ranch. And I just felt that was a story people needed to know. But I'm also working on some other stories right now about very different things that some of them are about science, some of them about the environment, and things that I think kids should know that matter to them and will make them more informed about the world.
We can see that children change quite a bit from the time they're born until, let's say, we stop calling them children. So when we say children's books, that's really a big area.
That's a great point.
Can you talk about what age group you focus on, or groups that you focus on, and then why those groups?
Right now, the book I've been talking about today, A Dinosaur Named Ruth, that really focuses on the age group kids between, I would say, 4 and 8, maybe 4 and 9. Although I do have an 11-year-old and he enjoys that book too. I don't know, I think that book is that age group is an incredibly curious, smart group of, time in kids' lives. And they're just open to so many new ideas. And they, I hope also that my books encourage them to read, encourage them to turn the pages and want to know more, whether it's about dinosaurs, whether it's about South Dakota, or just whether it's about a person like Ruth Mason, who was this incredibly persistent, inspiring person. I hope that they get inspired by her.
The inspiration is a very admirable thing to search or to try to create. What will they do with that inspiration as you envision?
One of the things I say, and I'll even talk about today in my presentations during this festival, is that whether it's something you find or something you believe in or something you do, never give up. Because Ruth Mason, the character, the focus of my story, the true life figure in my story, spent something like 70 years believing she had found something amazing in her backyard, and no one took her seriously. And so if you can take that attitude in whatever you do, I think that will be, a tool for the rest of your life.
Very interesting point. You made a point
Before, however,
that kids are interested in dinosaurs.
Yeah.
What do you think inspires that? Because it's not like something that you see every day, but it just seems like there are a lot of kids, other than the fact that they probably eat dinosaurs. We call them chickens now,
Oh,
but
that's right.
but what is it about dinosaurs that intrigues kids?
Dinosaurs, it seems impossible to believe that dinosaurs were even real. You could tell me a story and tell me there are these amazing, huge creatures with huge teeth that roamed the earth. I mean, it sounds made up, right? Jurassic Park, it sounds like a movie. And I think it plays into kids' imagination. And because there's so much we don't know about dinosaurs, and we're still learning all the time, which is one of the things I think is amazing about paleontology. I think it allows kids to they can plug their own imagination into it. And also, who doesn't want to hear about monsters that roam the earth? It's fascinating.
Good. Good. Well, what do you plan to talk about today?
I have two presentations today. One is why I wrote A Dinosaur Named Ruth and how I got the story, and why I think it's important for people to read the book and learn her story. And the second is how does a book become a book? It's such a strange process. This is my first book. I can't tell you the amount of things I have learned in the last year. My book came out last November. It's almost my book's birthday. That's what they say in the publishing world. And it's been an incredible journey for me too. So I want to talk to kids about how a book becomes a book and how they can improve their own writing. Maybe they're not going to publish a book, maybe they are, but how they can also become persuasive writers too.
Well, you're a writer, and as you mentioned, you're kind of inspiring young people to try to write. What kinds of things can children write about in the age group that you interact with?
One of the things I talk about in my presentation is writing a letter. So let's say you find something in your own backyard, like Ruth did. She spent a lifetime writing letters. Who could you write a letter to? Would that be a museum? Would that be a librarian? Would that be a teacher? Would that just be your best friend? Write a letter. It's first of all, don't we all love receiving letters? And it's amazing who you might be able to connect with, and maybe they'll write you back.
That's a wonderful prompt.
Because
a lot of times, even though we don't write letters very often, when we do, they typically are a bit uninspiring. They're kind of like, "Dear John, the weather is fine here today." Something that's like completely. But the letter could be exciting itself. And if we could inspire people to write letters that people want to read, as opposed to feeling an obligation to read.
Yeah, it's not a thank you note. It's not a thank you note.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. What other kind of things can children learn to write or be inspired to write?
Another thing I talk about is imagine something that you might find. Maybe you can't go find a dinosaur bone in your backyard, but imagine you did find something and then describe it for me. Write about its shape, its size, its color, its texture. What could it be used for? How old is it? So imagine something that you found and describe how amazing it is. And then maybe go read that to someone special in your life.
Are children writing poetry as you interact with them?
That's a great question. I mean, they certainly are. I know that from my own kids, but maybe not as much as they could be. It would be a great idea, to write. You could write a haiku about what you have found. I'd love to hear that.
Okay. This has been really wonderful. I know you have another presentation to go.
I do.
Yeah. So we're going to let you go and try to get Jennifer, it's your turn. Oh, we have another victim.
Lawrence, thank you so much. It was lovely to speak with
Thank
you.
you, thank you, thank you. And I hope we'll
Thank
get a
you,
chance
thank you.
to
And I hope we'll
come
get a
back
chance
on a
to
regular.
come back on a regular.
Okay, I'd love
and
to.
have a deeper
And have a deeper
conversation.
conversation.
I'd be very happy to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy, thank you. And do you need anything from me?
Who is our next person? here?
So our next author is Tracy Sorrell, who some of you might know because she did appear on Brainstorming virtually. And now we have her here in person to talk about her books. She's just finished a presentation up in the Science Center and about a Cherokee aerospace engineer. So we'll get Tracy in
Excellent.
here.
What was your name again?
Tracy Sorrell. Oh,
Tracy.
CO,
Nice
good
to
morning.
see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah. Well, the audience needs to be introduced to you. So could you tell us
Absolutely.
who is Tracy?
Yes. CO, Tracy Sorrell, Dagodoa, Jijalagi. Hi, I'm Tracy Sorrell. I'm a Cherokee Nation citizen and an author of a variety of works for young people. I write from board books to young adult, and here at the festival, I'm sharing some of my picture books and anthology pieces with young readers. And I just finished talking about Classified, the secret career of Mary Golda Ross, Cherokee aerospace engineer, with a group of highly engaged students. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, that should be quite interesting. Let me go back a little about and talk about who you're writing for. Because, young people really change a lot.
Yes.
And so, and their brains and how they use language and how they hear language. Who are you writing for about? And then can you tell us a little bit about how you approach that?
Sure. I mean, obviously today's youth are, it's not that young people today aren't similar to how we were as kids, right? I mean, they're going through their developmental stages just like we are, but the world is a much more fast-paced place for them. They have information overload in ways that we just simply didn't when we were younger. And so their access to information, stimulation from a variety of outside sources is ever present. And so I'm very conscious of who I'm writing for, regardless of what format it might be. And if it's a picture book or a graphic novel script, etc., I know those competing interests. And so my writing needs to be very tight, lyrical, engaging, move the story along. Passive verbs are the enemy. And whereas sometimes with adult reading, you can have several pages of setting or, deep in a character's thoughts for pages. No, absolutely not for young people. So I find it definitely some of the most dynamic and engaging writing that is going on in the world today. And I absolutely am energized being around young people and just the observations that they have and how their minds work and the way that they're relating to, again, a very different world that just simply didn't exist when I was younger, and I have, my son is almost 13. So he's very much brought me up in the ways of, seeing firsthand how things are going. And like I say, just visiting with young people at schools or book festivals, etc., has been eye-opening. And so I first and foremost, think very strongly about what is the right format for a story. Is this best told through fiction or nonfiction, or historical fiction, and but really centering how they take in information and knowing that too, that majority of every book that I write is going to end up being an audiobook, because so many of them take in books through audio, or there are what are called video ebooks. So some of the illustrations, if it's a picture book, will become animated. And so the words have to be just right. They have to be just right, because you want, regardless of who is the voiceover, the narrator for the story or playing the different characters, that they can really bring something to that and enrich the reader's experience. And I'm grateful that audiobooks exist as plentifully as they do for young people now, because I feel like we need to reach readers in whatever way they take in information. And
this generation is very much visual, but as well auditory, learners. Whereas I, would hear stories, of course, from my family, and teachers would read chapters and things. But by and large, most of my reading was me with a physical book. And so I really appreciate the variety of ways that we help young people access wonderful books now.
What kind of
What
subjects
kind of subjects do you try to bring to children, and how do you decide on the subjects?
A lot of that is informed by my personal background as a Cherokee Nation citizen and knowing what I didn't see when I was growing up. And then, witnessing my son, all these years later, who really doesn't have much difference in terms of what's being presented in his curriculum, and wanting to help correct a huge deficit. And thankfully, at the time, I didn't realize when I started writing that many other Native authors or writers and artists were looking to lend their voices as well. And so we really have a wonderful surge of books in the marketplace now that reflect historical, but most definitely contemporary realities, that we are still here and helping young people get things that they're not getting in the curriculum. Again, whether that's fiction or nonfiction in their English or social science, math, science classes, et cetera, being exposed to the fact that we are very much a part of the fabric of this continent. We've always have been. And just being very conscientious about looking at what hasn't had the light shown on it and then tackling those topics. So my first book, We Are Grateful, Ojali Haliga, was simply a book about Cherokee people today. There was not a book showing us in our contemporary lives. And I thought, that's egregious. We're the largest tribe in the country, and there's nothing that shows us in our contemporary lives. It's just traditional stories and a few biographies about Will Rogers and Wilma Mankiller for the educational market. I'm like, and we have a lot of people who are writers in our tribe, but writing for primarily adults. And so that book starts in the fall with Cherokee New Year, which is happening in about another week, and goes through the 4 seasons and things that we're taught as a people to be grateful, not just for wonderful things, but also difficulties in life. And that book took off really well. It wasn't the first book that I wrote, just the first one that I sold and got published. But since then, another one of my books, At the Mountain's Base, shines a light on women who serve in the military. And we don't talk about Native women serving in the military, really. We talk about men and code talkers and things. And so it's a 111-word poem that looks at the toll that takes, of course, on the family as much as it does on the person who is serving the nation. And Millie Ricks wrote Oglala Lakota, so right here in the state, was really someone that I did not know about when I wrote that poem. But my editor was like, there actually was a woman pilot, in World War II in the Women's Air Force Service Pilots program. So it was wonderful to help also bring her story to the forefront. So those are the kinds of things, like what do we maybe know among Native nations in our communities that it would be great for our kids to see themselves reflected in books about, but also for their peers to know, and their peers that live next to them or those that don't, to see in literature, again, whether that's nonfiction or fiction, from word books to YA.
You mentioned something very interesting about the books going to audio.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a big push to have young people learn native language. So it brings the question, are those books going to be in Cherokee?
So that is definitely one of the things that we're pushing for. So At the Mountain's Base was translated into the Cherokee language. It's an ebook. And in the audiobooks that are done, if there's any part that includes Cherokee language, which I try to include in as many of my books that it's relevant to, we always have first language speakers come in and do the audio for those sections so that students hear, like we still have first language speakers. We certainly, like many other Native nations across the country, are looking to reclaim those languages and grow the number of speakers. We're thankfully past the heavy boarding school era that robbed us of, many of our now elders being able to speak their languages. So it's an exciting time, and a lot of books are being dual language published. as well as in the audiobooks, but also in the picture books. And then some are being translated completely into the language. So it's exciting, and it's much more dynamic, right? Meet people where they're at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned writing poetry.
Yes.
Are you writing the poetry in Cherokee?
No. So one of the things that is on my goal list for the next couple of years, our tribe has a master language apprentice program. And so it's an immersive 2-year program where you are full-time learning the language. And so of course, my writing will be relegated to hours outside of that. But that is my hope, is to be able to write poetry, short stories, historical vignettes in the language to, again, help not just young people, but also adults who are learning the language to have materials to read, and I was just gonna say in Sequoia's syllabary, that he invented to go along with the spoken language.
That would be, I think, a very important addition to the language learning
Mhm.
effort. And I'll just drop that if you go on my YouTube channel, I actually have about a 1-hour program of people doing poetry that Lakota people wrote and are reading in Lakota.
Oh, I know that sounds beautiful. A
And
number
I
of
think it's a wonderful addition to learning.
Yes, absolutely.
learning.
And what a beautiful way to, I mean, if you speak another language, which my second language is Spanish, and Cherokee, I speak at a much more elementary level than my Spanish, which I'm fluent in. There's a different worldview, right? There's a different way of processing things. And so to be able to hear, poetry in another language, or just anything, I mean, the ways that, like in Cherokee, when you say Tracy Sorrell Dagwadoa, I'm not saying my name is Tracy. I am called by them, because you look at, our language is very relational. It's like 75% verbs instead of English, which is very noun, adjective heavy. And so it's that relation of like, other people have named me, right? I am connected to these people instead of that singular, like my name is, well, I mean, unless you change your name later, your name was given to you by others around you. So there's just those kind of very subtle, but imbued with a lot of meaning realities that come with speaking different languages. So I find it all fascinating.
Well, that's going to be very intriguing when you do the translations, poetry or not,
Mhm.
in your book, because there are many interesting things that speak to, that's a whole way of thinking that's different between languages.
Mhm.
It's not just the words are different. It's what those words represent.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a
quite
worldview.
different.
It is a worldview.
It is.
It's a system of values, and it's a completely different way of processing, right? Life around you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. You actually have to become a different person.
Yeah, your
to
brain
speak
is,
the
your
language.
soul is stretched in a very new way. Yeah.
Well, but the way you think about the world.
Mhm.
A good example is
Japanese. In
the word
Japanese,
for
the word
lightning
for lightning and thunder
is the same thing. And I forget the name of the language now, but it's an African language
Mhm.
where
where
the
the
words
words
sing and
and
dance
dance
are
are the
same word,
word,
because
because they don't make a
separation.
separation.
You know,
Right. They
Just
come
like that.
together. Yeah.
exactly. Just like Japanese don't make a difference between the thunder and lightning, it's one phenomenon.
Mhm.
They don't make a difference between singing and dancing, because for them, it's
Right.
one phenomenon.
Yeah.
So to bring that feeling into the language, into the translation,
Mhm.
and to teach people about these different ways to think, I think is a phenomenal
Mhm.
objective.
Yeah, I joke with friends and family, and fellow creatives all the time, like, I'm never not going to be busy the rest of my life. Like, I've got lots of, growing and learning to do, and stretching. And so that's, I mean, you're only here a very short time, right? An infinitesimally small of time when you look at the continuum of time. And, so I'm like, I gotta live and do lots of stuff, because I don't have very long here, and the world is a beautiful, dynamic place. So why not?
Tell us what you want to do going forward as far as writing. What are some of those projects?
Well, in addition to being able to do more bilingual or monolingual, things with Cherokee, this next year I want to be off the road a lot more. and writing, because I want to do some longer works. I'd like to work on a chapter book series. I haven't decided if that's going to be just kind of a contemporary fiction or maybe a mystery series, for young people. I'm not sure. And maybe just a single mystery book. I definitely would like to work on some graphic novel scripts, young adult nonfiction around different policy periods, laws and things that have impacted Native nations and their responses to those, and their own activism, for things that they want on a national level. So there's a lot. I was writing it out last week, actually. It's like, what do I want to work on after I wrap up this busy fall travel season, and hopefully get this book that's due to the editor next month to them, if not next month, the following month. And it's like, you've got quite the list, to keep me busy. And but that's good, right? You stay out of trouble if you're
Well,
busy.
some of us,
Yeah, well, maybe, right? Yeah, I don't know. Staying out of trouble sometimes is not all it's cracked up to be, right?
and not always possible.
Right. That's so true. That's so true. Well, and you get yourself in trouble when you're not even trying, right? I mean, I look at this whole banned books thing right now, and it just weighs heavy on my soul that, books for young people are, we disseminate those through gatekeepers, right? It's like, what does the bookstore choose to stock? What does the teacher, the librarian, public or school choose to do? What do the young people around in that child's home or community choose to have available to them? And
we just have to make sure they use that right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've had my books end up on those lists, and I was like, have you read my books? I mean, but the folks that are doing this, they're not readers, right? They're not, I mean, it's about control. I get it. But at the same time, it concerns me. And so people will say, well, what can we do? And I'm like, you can definitely weigh in at your local school board and say, I support young people having access to a variety of books. Like, the world is a more dynamic place now. And if you look at our census data for 2020, even though there's always a undercount, majority of people under the age of 30 in this country are non-white. It's even more so for those under 18. So you want books that reflect the readership first and foremost, right? How are they going to engage if they aren't reflected? And young people know their intersections and their identities. I mean, it's wonderful, right? There's so many of us as adults who, couldn't necessarily express those things, or our grandparents, couldn't express, their identities without a lot of fear. And so I don't want young people to have to go back the way it was. It's like, no, you know who you are. Like, let's have literature that, reflects who you are in your peer group, right? That's the world they're going to navigate. I mean, again, we're all going to be here a short time. They've got to carry things forward. So let's, show some compassion and love and support here, and let them do that. But yeah, like I said, you can end up in trouble when you want to, and sometimes when you're just trying to write.
Yeah, but it's good trouble.
Yeah, well, I mean, people say, oh, it's an honor to be on the banned books list. I will say unequivocally, it is never an honor to be on the banned books list, because, that means less young people are having access to books that they should be able to decide they want to read. I don't want to be, so many of the books on that list are simply because they're from a BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian creator, or they're LGBTQIP plus. Okay, again, that's who our people are, right? That is the world. Like, what are you denying? Reality? I know.
It's a very interesting thing that someone pointed out to me.
Mm-hmm.
is that many of those people don't realize that we get books now on flash drives. So it doesn't matter if you burn them, they don't go away.
Right. Well, I mean, you
They're on
know,
somebody's hard drive.
yeah, you can, you know, access things, I mean, through so many different means, right? And I just want to say,
Yep.
I was reading, you know, ahead of my age group at the time, right? I mean, it's just going to happen. We didn't really have young adult literature so much, right? I mean, S.E. Hinton had written some books, and those were, you know, a little older for me, but it's like, you know, I blazed through those, went on to other stuff, but now like the field of literature for young people is so dynamic and amazing. I can't fathom not being able to, like I say, read and share wonderful, wonderful books.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's been wonderful having this conversation.
Yes.
And I would hope that we can continue this on one of our regular weekly shows where we can get a lot more under the hood of the kind of things you're doing, how you can encourage, how we can all encourage young people to not only be readers, but writers as well, because we're going to
Absolutely.
need that next.
Yes, or and sharing their stories through art, right? Or being those voiceover narrators, right? There's so many dynamic
Yes.
possibilities of ways that they can share their storytelling, writing scripts for films or TV shows. I mean, absolutely, please, you know, our lives are made up of story there's a story of our birth to the time we leave. And that's what helps us make meaning of life. So why wouldn't we all want to encourage everyone in whatever format works for them to share their stories? And with that, I am going to have to run off and meet my next group of young people, but I just appreciate being here at the South Dakota Festival of Books and spending this time with all of you. And Wado, as we say in Cherokee, thank you, Lawrence, for the invitation to sit down and have a brief visit with you.
I look forward to it again.
All right. We don't say goodbye in Cherokee. We say until we see each other again. So I'll say Donada Goha'i. Take care.
Or as I would say, don't say goodbye, you're just leaving early.
That's exactly. Take care, everyone. Donada Goha'i.
Well, we have my sister Jennifer back.
Yeah. Here I am.
Sister
Yeah.
Jennifer.
This has been great to listen to all these different perspectives. And the next one we have coming up is a really dynamic author, illustrator, cartoonist, and his name is Mike Artell. And I know he's almost ready to speak because he just got some coffee out of the Starbucks machine behind me. So,
So he's got drugs.
yeah, he's going to be
Drugs
very
on board.
lively. So,
Mike, stop gabbing and get over here.
here we go.
Get over here again.
Mike Artell,
How
how
are
you
you?
doing?
Good, good, good.
Good, good. I see we got the same barber.
Yeah, we do. Well, you're hiding it now.
Yeah, I'm hiding it. How are you doing today?
Doing great. This is so much fun.
Yeah, yeah.
It's such a great festival, and I just had a session with some of the kids, and it's just so much fun. It's great to be face to face again.
Yes. Let's talk about you first, so that our audience
first,
here
so that our
can
audience
get
here
a sense of
can get
like,
a sense
you
of like
are.
who you are.
what kind of books you write, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I write and illustrate children's books primarily. And I've written about 50 books, and I've illustrated most of them, not all, only because sometimes I will write a book and I don't feel like the way that I draw is right for that book. So I will get a different illustrator. And conversely, sometimes someone will write a book and ask me to illustrate. Excuse me. So done both, you know, but primarily I do both, write and illustrate. And started out, if you would tell any of my teachers that I'd be doing this for a living, they would not believe me. Believe me. I was somewhat challenging young man, you know, not bad, but class clown. You know, I was a legend in my own mind. You know, in elementary school, I thought I was so funny. But as it turns out, you know, that ability to play with words and to be glib as a kid really helped a lot. I felt very comfortable speaking, you know, as a kid, and my family had a lot to do with that. I mean, my sister's a writer. My brother's a musician. Both sisters are writers, actually. One for a newspaper and one actually wrote screenplays. So the whole family was kind of creative. And you had to be pretty good with words just to watch your back, because we were all always teasing each other. So then I went to college, got a degree in marketing. And I tell people all the time that I really credit my degree in marketing and my experience in marketing for being able to make a living doing this, writing and illustrating books, because I took a little different approach when I started writing and illustrating. I instead of just writing for my inspiration, I would actually go to teachers and librarians and say, what kind of books do you need? And they would say, well, we could use some simple biographies. Got it. I'd go home and write a simple biography, and then it would get published. And like, wow, Mike, how'd you do that? It's like, well, marketing. I asked my customers what they wanted, and they told me. And so now I still want to write great books. I do my best to write a really good book, to illustrate it well. But it's my job. People will say, what's your inspiration? And I used to say, well, my daughter's tuition. That's my inspiration. I don't have time to be, I don't have the luxury of being inspired. I got to work.
So what subjects have you been writing about?
Well, I'm struggling a little bit because I do a lot. I'm kind of ADD when it comes to that. I do a lot of nonfiction. I've done books on space and weather and insects and the Basketball Hall of Fame. I've done biographies on Michael Jordan, Drew Brees. I've done a lot of jokes and riddles and tongue twister books. I've done professional books for teachers. I've done a lot of wordplay books, and then I've done books that I don't know. I've done one or two chapter books, books for parents on how to help kids with reading, things like that. So really all over the place, kind of whatever strikes my fancy at the time. To tell you the truth, what I'm interested in.
What age groups are you usually?
I've done everything from toddler books, board books, with Lift the Flaps and things like that, to pretty sophisticated books on read alouds for teachers, professional books. So it really just, it's hard for me to stay focused on one thing, and also too, really, to make a living doing this. This isn't my hobby. This is what I do for a living. To make a living all those years, you have to be pretty nimble, and you have to look for opportunities. And like I said, it's a job. It's a job. And if you want to pay a bill, you have to. Sometimes I remember when I got started, I used to do things for local newspapers, just little articles, and go see an advertising agency and see if I can do some copy for them. You just do what you can.
Yeah.
So.
How does your approach to writing a book for a toddler different from how you approach writing a book for an older child?
Right. Well, you have to be very certain when you write a toddler book of what you're trying to accomplish, and you can't write the attention span tends to be about 1 minute per year. So if you have a 3-year-old, you got about 3 minutes to do whatever it is you're going to do there. So if I'm going to write a toddler book, I will stick to something like concepts, shapes, colors, animals. I did a book called Who Said Moo, and it was like a little boy comes up and here's an animal. He says, "Who said moo? Was it you?" And the sheep says, "No. Ba 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 is what I do." And who said moo? Was it you? No. Quack 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 is what I do. So very repetitive, very predictable. And that's what the predictability is, what captures the toddler's interest, because they know they can predict, they feel like they're part of it. I feel really strong that a book, whether it's for a toddler or for an adult, is a conversation. And it's like someone might say, well, wait, you're the one talking, the author's the one talking. But that reader's out there going, why did that character do that? why, what's going to happen next? You can almost hear the reader doing that. I play music too. And when I'm playing music, I have more fun if I can see the people are having fun. You play better. And I think if you anticipate what those readers are thinking, or if you're leading them down a certain path, hopefully, you write better. So that, it's a much more sophisticated thing with an older reader, simply because they have much more to draw on, life experience. With toddlers, I would say keep it to the concept books.
Well, when you're trying to get children interested, you mentioned that they have a short attention span. So one of the things I've experienced is that if you read a book to a child that they like, they want you to read it over and over.
Of course.
They want you to read it over and over.
How do you reconcile
How do you
those
reconcile those two
experiences?
It comes with the
experiences?
territory. It just comes with the territory. It's funny. I did a joke book one time. I don't remember what it was about, but it was just a series of jokes, kid joke book. And I just remember one time I was at a conference that I had been to before, and a mother came up to me and said, "We bought your book the last time you hear your joke book." She said, and she looked at me and she said, "And my son has told me every joke 1,000 times." She was absolutely up to here with that book.
And you
And you have to fake
You
that
have
you're
to
really-
fake it.
What?
But it's like when a child
When they
brings you
ask
a
you to
drawing.
riddle,
Yeah.
you have to pretend you don't know the answer.
Or you see a child's drawing, you don't say, "What is that?" You say, "Oh, tell me about your drawing." Because, it's the same
I
thing. You have to
say-
fake it. You
I
say, "What the heck is
What
that?"
is that?
That's right. But, that, how do you get around that? I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of like, have you ever watched a movie twice or a television show? Or,
I
I tried not to.
yeah, some people do. And, it's funny. I think there's something else to that, because I have a few books on, my shelves at home. But I'm a big library person. I like the library. But I know many people who have, their home is filled with bookshelves, filled with books, which is fine, but I've never understood that. Because it's like, didn't you read that? And it's like, are you planning on reading it a whole bunch more times? Why is it still there? Because it's filling some other need, I think. I don't know what it is.
Well, I have a large library like
Oh,
that.
good. But tell me.
But it's almost exclusively reference books.
Ah,
And I
okay.
don't buy books for sensation. I
Yeah.
buy it for information.
Oh, there
And
you
I
go.
know I'm never gonna memorize all that. That's why I keep the books.
Yeah.
Memorize all that. That's why I keep the
Oh,
books.
It's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like in my shed in the back, I have a tool that I haven't used in 5 years, but I may need that tool. So I'm going to keep it around. Yeah, so, but
Well, this has been really be wonderful. We're coming kind of at the end of my special hour here. I would like to give one chance to in our audience. Do you have any questions? And I've completely been remiss in that in this episode. Anybody
if we
have
have any questions,
questions? Answers?
the funny accent is New Orleans, by the way.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yo, darling, how you doing? How's your mom and them?
Knowledge.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I ate catfish yesterday, so I'm.
Oh, there you
I
go.
can't understand what you're-
Got one toe in the water.
What you're
Yeah.
saying.
Get you down there with some jambalaya and gumbo. Man.
It helps.
There you go. Gator.
There you go.
Gator.
Gator.
Yeah.
Gotta have gator.
Then you can
That really-
speak it.
Then you can
Tastes
speak
like
it
chicken.
then once you
It
eat
tastes
the gator.
like
It
chicken.
tastes like
Chicken
chicken.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and sharing this time with us. I hope we'll have a chance to actually get more into it. I didn't get to many of the questions I have just because I knew we didn't have the time.
Yeah.
But I hope
Like
that
that.
in the
I would like
future
that,
we
yeah.
will. Yes,
Sounds great.
that would be great.
Well, thanks for
That would
having
be
me.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
See you.
All right.
Take care. Bye now.
Okay,
Yeah.
bye. Miss Jennifer is coming back. Well, this has been a wonderful experience. Tell us where people can go to join this experience.
Well, if you are in the Sioux Falls area, we've got 2 more sets of sessions coming up today. We'll have 4 authors speaking at 12:30 and another 4, or maybe it's 3 speaking at 1:30 here at the Washington Pavilion. Anyone can walk in. We've got some school groups wandering around, but you don't have to be a student to come and enjoy the presentations here. And then tomorrow we'll be in Brookings and we will have presentations by a lot of these same authors at the Children's Museum in Brookings. That starts, I think, again at 10 in the morning and goes till 2:30. And several of them will be speaking just to general audiences on Saturday as well. So come on down and join us here in Sioux Falls this afternoon, or come up to Brookings tomorrow and Saturday, and you can hear from some of the people you've met today.
Can you tell us a little bit about what people can expect tomorrow from not only children's authors, but from the book festival in general?
Yeah, tomorrow we've got a full day of events starting at 10 and going till about 9:30 at night, I think, is when the poetry open mic ends up getting over usually. Those are at the Children's Museum, the Brookings Public Library, the Brookings Arts Council, a couple of downtown Brookings locations, and also quite a few events at the Oscar Larson Performing Arts Center, which is on the edge of the SDSU campus. So a great venue for us. And we'll be at all those same places again on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then we have a few closing events on Sunday at McCrory Garden. So we're hoping for some good weather so that we can talk about seeds and food and gardens and planting, and then roll right into the McCrory Gardens Party on the Porch, which goes from 12 to 3, food trucks, all that kind of stuff. So.
You mean midnight to 3 in the morning?
No, I mean noon.
Oh, no.
I mean, it might be fun to
I was
walk the
gonna
gardens
say,
at midnight.
I knew you were a party animal, but boy, that's way off the rail.
Pretty off the rail.
Well, we've come to the end of our road. It's one of those rock songs, just to say. I'm really appreciative of all of you.
Really appreciative of all of you who have
and
come
join
and
us.
join us.
And those of you on Facebook, and those of you who will listen later on. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next week, same time, same station.
Bye, everyone.